Well, I just want to continue a story. It's about, it continues after I failed as an antique dealer and a gallery owner. I mean, I couldn't pay the rent. And so I had to give up. But I'd learned such a lot. And I saw an advertisement for someone to run an emporium in South Kensington, which actually is near the Victoria and Albert Museum. And so I applied for that. I thought it sounded really good. It was vintage decorative objects. And so I turned up to be confronted by a man named Wilfred Bull and his wife, Patsy Bull. And I have to say, the moment I saw Wilfred with his unblinking eyes, he did rather scare me. But Patsy was very vivacious and outgoing. And I told them, that if they chose me to run this emporium of wonderful objects, decorative objects, I would run the business as if I owned it. Because I think if you run a business, you have to run it as if you own it. Anyway, I got the job. And we had lots of wonderful clients. One of the clients actually was, but it was a few years into my being there, was Ava Gardner, who actually came to live just 2 or 3 streets away. And she bought something. And anyway, she's now gone, but there were so many. Oh, Victor Lowndes from the Playboy Club. And I ended up selling him something. I had to deliver something to him on the penthouse of the Playboy Club. So with all these girls in their bunny costumes, and I had champagne and all that sort of stuff. So it was all very exciting at the time. One of the things that was not so exciting for Patsy Bull was the many times that people came in who would write columns about antiques in various newspapers, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Observer, and they discovered me. And I always had a good story to tell. So if they had a bit of, if they needed to fill up their pages, they'd come to me and I would tell them a story, and this would be, and quite often it would say the charming and knowledgeable Mark Krimmel. Well, charming, I don't know, maybe. Knowledgeable, well, I'd been gathering a lot of knowledge over the years, which actually would eventually lead me into the film industry, but I was a long, long way from the film industry. But I'd been there actually a few weeks in this wonderful emporium that sold incredible pieces of decorative objects, octans, sextants, jockey scales, and endless things. And a dealer came in who I actually knew from my old place. And he said, how well do you know Wilfred? I said, well, I don't know him very well. I only know him from when I did my interview. And of course, he comes up a few times and I speak to him. But I said, he actually scares me a little. He said, well, did you know he killed his brother? I said, no. He said, yes, it's about 10 years ago. And it was Boxing Day. Boxing Day is the day after Christmas, when traditionally people who live in the countryside will view the fox hunting, no more, of course, but Wilfrid would go out with his brother shooting in the woods. And it happened this particular day, apparently, Boxing Day, and Wilfrid tripped over and his gun went off and his brother was killed. And so Wilfrid inherited his brother's part of the business, but also he inherited his brother's girlfriend, Patsy. So this was Wilfrid. And the antique dealer said, you've got to handle him really carefully. So I would have all these be interviewed by these people who wrote columns in the newspapers about antiques. And always it was Mark Rimmel, so on and so forth. And it was Thomas Humphrey was the name of the shop. And Thomas Humphrey were the two sons of Wilfrid and Patsy. Now, the first time it happened that my name appeared in this column, it was okay, no problem. The second time, Patsy began to take a little bit of a notice. And the third time, and they lived 2 hours away in the countryside, and they had a wonderful antique business selling ordinary, well, not ordinary, but extraordinary antiques. And she would come waving the newspaper. And she stormed through the door. The first time I always remember it, because I wondered what the hell was going on. Mark Rimmel, all we hear is Mark Rimmel. Where is my husband's name? I said, well, Patsy, they ask me the questions and I answer them. And I said, they mentioned Thomas Humphrey. And so this went on for quite a while. And I have to say I got rather fed up with it. But then came the Earl's Court International Fair. It was the first one in the 1960s, 70s, I think. And we had a stand there for vintage things. And the cut-off date would be about 1930. But also there was an antique part, and the cut-off date was much earlier, of course. And it was going to be opened by Princess Margaret. And so I set up the stand on behalf of Wilfrid, of course, and it looked very decorative. And a few of the exhibits were actually my collection of 1920s, 1930s Paris fashion design drawings, which I bought in 1973, some of which are now in the Victoria and Albert Museum under the Rimmel collection. And so these were on display, and Princess Margaret would be opening this exhibition. Princess Margaret, Her Royal Highness. And it was about 6 o'clock, I think, when she was doing the tour. And I could see them, a crowd of people coming, and obviously it was Princess Margaret. And she stopped at my stand, and she observed these 1920s drawings and then walked on. But a few minutes later, her lady-in-waiting came. And she said, oh, Her Royal Highness has rather likes your fashion drawings. Could you donate 4 of your drawings to Her Royal Highness? Well, of course, I had no choice. There's £100 worth of drawings. And so I said, yes, of course. So Her Royal Highness, Princess Margaret, sister of our late Queen Elizabeth, has my fashion drawings. And I must say, I was really pissed off. So the exhibition ended, and I'd been there for 5 years and had met lots of wonderful people. Ava Gardner actually moved 2 streets away, and she came in as a client, and I sold her something, and she's a charming lady. And, but there were many, Victor Lowndes from the Playboy Club, and he invited me to the Playboy Club in the penthouse, which is his private apartments. And so I had champagne there with all these bunny girls and so on and so forth. It was quite exciting at the time. And so I left eventually. Of course, every day I learned something. You never stop learning now. Even now, you never stop learning. And those fashion drawings, by the way, I have them. I rescued quite a few of them from the fire. And I have them actually on the floor at my side. So if anybody wants any fashion drawings, just come to me. A few thousand forints and you could have a fashion drawing. So I left. And then I went to work for a photo studio, which eventually would actually lead me into the film industry. But I had no idea about that at the time. I had no desire to be in the film industry. I would love to have been an antique dealer and a gallery owner like I was before, but I'm not a businessman, I'm afraid. And so I started to work at this photo studio, doing the styling and designing for advertisements and so on. And I think I was rather good at it. And there were about 10 photographers specializing in still life, in fashion, children, men's fashion, women's fashion, and so on. And I was a freelance, so I was free to come and go as I wished. And I was walking along Oxford Street, which is one of the main streets in London. And the studios was not far from there. And I happened to look at the headlines for the local evening paper. And the headlines read, "Antique dealer's wife shot to death." So I thought, well, I know so many people, maybe I know this person. And so I bought the newspaper, and there staring out at me was Patsy Bull, shot to death. And it said that they thought she was in the warehouse at the time, which was connected to their house. And it was said that she disturbed a burglar, and in the course of the burglary, she was shot and killed. So there was Patsy Bull, no longer. And the next day I walked along, and there's another headline. Antique dealer arrested for murder. And it was Wilfred. And he was committed for trial, and he received a life sentence. How anybody could be so evil, because apparently what happened, he was cooking, dinner was cooking, and he rang the warehouse, actually, of course, knowing that she was dead. She rang the warehouse, and of course, there was no response. So he said to one of his children, "Go and tell Mummy that dinner is ready." Knowing, of course, that this child, who was about 8 years old, would discover his mother. And so that was Wilfred Bull. I think he is now free, because a life sentence doesn't mean life. It means whatever it is, 15, 20 years. And so that was my fear of Wilfred was well placed, I think. it seems that the things that I get involved in always seem to have some drama attached to it. And you couldn't get much more dramatic than that. So my next story, I don't know what it will be, but it will be something I hope that you will find interesting. But hopefully no murder attached to it. Thank you very much.